A poor black maid drops to her knees in the marble halls of a billion-dollar empire and whispers, "I'll birth you as many sons as you want, just don't send me home." But she's not begging for love. She's begging for mercy. He's the Virgin CEO, a man so cold, so perfect, the world swears he doesn't feel anything at all, until her trembling voice cracks through his armor. What begins as a desperate plea turns into a secret that could destroy them both. A kiss caught in the rain, a scandal that shakes the entire company, and a forbidden bond that even money can't silence. But behind the headlines and whispers lies a deeper truth, one that could either save countless lives or ruin them forever. When pride meets faith, and power faces grace, will the man who never believed in love risk everything for the woman who taught him what it means to have a soul? Or will the world's cruel judgment tear them apart before their story even begins? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The late afternoon sun streamed through the towering glass windows of Dunham International Holdings, casting long shadows across the pristine marble lobby. The space buzzed with the typical post-board meeting energy, the clink of glasses, murmured conversations, and the sharp clicks of expensive shoes against polished floors. Amara Johnson kept her movements steady and precise as she navigated through clusters of executives in their tailored suits. Her black uniform felt scratchy against her skin, but she maintained her composure, balancing the silver tray of used champagne glasses with practiced care. She'd been doing this job for 6 months now, and she knew the rhythm of these gatherings. The voices around her blurred into white noise as she focused on her task. These people rarely saw her. She was just another shadow moving through their world of high finance and corporate deals. She'd learned to make herself nearly invisible, efficient and quiet like a gentle breeze. Then it happened. A senior executive backed up suddenly, his arm catching her elbow. The tray tilted, and time seemed to slow as she watched the champagne glasses slide. The crash echoed through the lobby like a cymbal, crystal fragments scattering across the marble floor in a spectacular display. Silence fell. Heavy. Judging. Amara's cheeks burned as she immediately dropped to her knees, reaching for the largest pieces first. "I'm so sorry," she murmured, though no one seemed to be listening. The executives simply stepped around the mess, resuming their conversations as if nothing had happened. "This is unacceptable." The voice cut through the ambient chatter like ice. Amara looked up to find Michael Dunham standing over her, his tall frame casting a shadow across the scattered glass. His presence commanded attention, from his perfectly knotted tie to his immaculately polished shoes. She'd seen him before, of course. Everyone knew the young CEO who'd made headlines as much for his business acumen as for his famous celibacy, earning him the nickname the Virgin CEO in business magazines. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Dunham," Amara said softly, meeting his steel-grey eyes for just a moment before returning to her task. "I'll have this cleaned up right away." Something in her tone made him pause. He'd expected excuses, perhaps tears, or the defensive attitude he'd encountered so often in employees who made mistakes. Instead, her apology carried a simple dignity that caught him off guard. "See that you do," he said, but the words came out less harsh than he'd intended. He found himself watching as she carefully gathered the shards, her movements deliberate and graceful, despite the pressure of his presence. A colleague called his name, breaking the moment. Michael straightened his jacket and turned away, but something had shifted in his usually ordered mind. As he walked toward the elevator, he found himself glancing back at the young maid, still methodically cleaning up the mess. The afternoon dragged into evening, and Michael sat in his corner office, unable to focus on the quarterly reports spread across his desk. The numbers blurred before his eyes, his thoughts drifting back to the lobby incident. It bothered him, this inability to concentrate. He prided himself on his self-discipline, on the walls he'd built around his emotions after his mother's death. These walls had helped him build Dunham International into what it was today. He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the growing dusk. The office had quieted, most employees having left for the day. A movement caught his eye in the lobby below. It was her again, the maid. She was working her way across the vast floor with a mop, the overhead lights flickering slightly, creating a dance of shadows around her. Even from this height, he could see the care she took with each stroke, ensuring no spot was missed. Michael found himself wondering about her name, her story. It was an unusual feeling. He rarely thought about the support staff beyond their function. But there was something about her composure, the quiet dignity in her apology, that had cracked his carefully maintained facade of indifference. He watched as she paused to wipe her brow, then continued her methodical work. The sight stirred a memory he'd long suppressed. His mother, Evelyn, on her knees in their garden, tending to her beloved roses with the same careful attention, the same gentle presence. The thought made him uncomfortable. He didn't like these unbidden memories, these cracks in his control. Yet he remained at the window, watching until she finished her task and disappeared into the service corridor. Later that night, as he sat in his penthouse apartment, Michael realized he'd brought home the quarterly reports, but hadn't read a single page. Instead, his mind kept returning to the lobby, to that moment when brown eyes had met his with unexpected sincerity. It wasn't attraction. He'd learned long ago to suppress such impulses. This was something different, something that made him question the careful order of his world. He got up and poured himself a glass of water, trying to shake off this strange distraction. Tomorrow would be another day of meetings and decisions, of maintaining the perfect image he'd worked so hard to build. He couldn't allow himself to be unsettled by a chance encounter with a maid. But as he stood there in his pristine kitchen, he knew something had changed. Like a single drop of ink in clear water, the memory of her quiet dignity was spreading through his consciousness, disturbing the careful patterns of his life. The next morning, he would return to his routine. He would be Michael Dunham, the perfectionist CEO, the man who had everything under control. But for now, in the quiet of his apartment, he allowed himself to acknowledge the strange stirring in his chest. Not desire, but something deeper, more unsettling. Something that felt dangerously like curiosity about the young woman who had, without trying, made him question the walls he'd built around his heart. The city lights twinkled beyond his windows, and somewhere out there, Amara Johnson was probably returning to her own home, unaware that she had caused even a ripple in the carefully ordered world of Michael Dunham. Yet that ripple was there, spreading in ways neither of them could predict, disturbing the surface of a life that had been still for far too long. The empty halls of Dunham International echoed with the soft swish of Amara's cleaning cloth against mahogany surfaces. At 10 o'clock in the evening, the building had fallen silent except for the quiet hum of the air conditioning and her gentle melody, an old spiritual her mother used to sing. The words brought comfort as she worked, though exhaustion pulled at her limbs. "Wade in the water," she sang softly, wiping down the impressive desk in Michael Dunham's private office. The overtime pay would help with this month's rent, and maybe leave enough for a care package to send home to her little brother. The thought of Marcus going hungry drove her to take on extra hours whenever possible. The premium cleaning supplies left a pleasant lemon scent in the air as she moved methodically around the spacious corner office. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering cityscape below, so different from the dusty streets of her hometown in Alabama. Amara paused to massage her aching shoulders, then returned to polishing the dark wood surfaces until they gleamed. She had just begun cleaning the windowsills when the office door swung open. Michael Dunham stood in the doorway, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the carpeted floor. His expression darkened as he registered her presence in his private sanctuary. "What are you doing in here?" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. "This area is restricted access only." Amara's heart leapt into her throat. The cleaning cloth slipped from her trembling fingers. "Mr. Dunham, I'm so sorry, I was just..." "Just what? Going through my personal files?" He strode toward her, his normally perfect hair slightly disheveled from the long day. "Security! No, please!" Panic rose in her chest as she heard footsteps approaching. "I only wanted to earn extra money for my brother back home. He's only 13, and since Mama passed..." The HR director, Mrs. Peterson, burst into the office, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. The security guard hovered anxiously in the doorway. "What's going on here?" "Found this woman in my private office after hours," Michael said coldly. "Unauthorized access to sensitive areas." Mrs. Peterson's thin lips pressed into an even thinner line. "That's grounds for immediate termination. Clear out your locker and leave the premises immediately." The words hit Amara like a physical blow. Without this job, she'd have to return to Alabama in shame, to the poverty she'd fought so hard to escape. Marcus's face flashed before her eyes, her baby brother waiting for her help, counting on her to be strong. Something inside her broke. Before she could stop herself, she fell to her knees before Michael, tears streaming down her face. "Please, sir, I'll birth you as many sons as you want. Just don't send me home." The desperate words hung in the air like smoke. Amara clasped her hands over her mouth, horrified at what she'd just said. Michael stared at her, his face unreadable, while Mrs. Peterson made a sound of disgust. But something had changed in Michael's expression. The cold mask slipped, revealing something else. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. He stood very still, studying her tear-stained face, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Mrs. Peterson," he said quietly, not taking his eyes off Amara. "Please leave us." "But Mr. Dunham, that will be all." His tone left no room for argument. The HR director departed with obvious reluctance, closing the door behind her. The silence that followed felt heavy with unspoken words. Michael walked to his desk and leaned against it, his movements deliberate. "Stand up, please." Amara rose shakily to her feet, wiping her cheeks with trembling hands. She couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. That wasn't a proposition, was it? His voice had lost its sharp edge. "No, sir." She shook her head, shame burning her cheeks. "I'm sorry. I can't fail my brother. I promised Mama before she died that I'd take care of him." Michael was quiet for a long moment, studying her. The city lights behind him cast his face in shadow, but she could feel the weight of his attention. "Go home for tonight," he said finally. "I need to think about this situation." Amara nodded, gathering her cleaning supplies with unsteady hands. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. "Miss Johnson?" She turned, heart pounding. "Your brother. What's his name?" "Marcus, sir." He nodded once, then turned to look out at the city. Amara slipped out of the office, leaving him standing motionless by the window, her desperate words seemingly frozen in the air between them. The elevator ride down felt endless. Amara leaned against the mirrored wall, her reflection showing a young woman she barely recognized. Eyes red from crying, uniform wrinkled, pride in tatters. But beneath the fear and shame, a tiny spark of hope remained. Something had changed in that office. She'd seen it in Michael Dunham's eyes when he looked at her, really looked at her, as if seeing past the uniform to the person beneath. In his office, Michael remained at the window, his own reflection overlaying the city lights. The phrase echoed in his mind like a hymn, not for its literal meaning, but for the raw desperation behind it. He'd recognized something in that moment, a hunger not of the body but of the soul, a fear he understood all too well. The fear of failing those who depend on you, of watching helplessly as your world crumbles. The cleaning cloth Amara had dropped still lay on the floor. He picked it up, the lemon scent rising from the fabric. Such a simple thing, yet it represented so much. Dignity, determination, the will to work hard no matter how menial the task. He folded it carefully and placed it on his desk, a reminder of this unexpected encounter that had somehow pierced the armor he'd spent years building around himself. The night deepened around him, but Michael remained in his office, lost in thought. Outside, the city hummed with life, while inside, something shifted in the carefully ordered world of Michael Dunham, something that felt uncomfortably like compassion. Sunlight crept through the threadbare curtains of Amara's dormitory room, casting thin shadows across her narrow bed. She hadn't slept much, tossing and turning as last night's humiliation played on repeat in her mind. The memory of kneeling before Michael Dunham made her cheeks burn with shame. A rustling sound caught her attention. Rolling over, she spotted a crisp white envelope that had been slipped under her door. Her heart skipped when she recognized the Dunham International letterhead. With trembling fingers, she tore it open. Your presence is required in my office at 9 o'clock sharp. Michael Dunham. The handwriting was precise and angular, just like the man himself. Amara checked her phone. 7:45 in the morning. Her stomach churned with dread as she prepared for what she assumed would be her final dismissal. In the tiny bathroom she shared with 3 other maids, Amara carefully pressed her uniform and pinned her hair back neatly. Lord, give me strength, she whispered to her reflection, straightening her spine. Whatever came next, she would face it with dignity. The elevator ride to the penthouse office felt like ascending to judgment. When the doors opened, Michael's secretary gave her a curious look, but waved her straight in. He's expecting you. Michael stood at his usual spot by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. Good morning, Miss Johnson. You're 3 minutes early. I appreciate punctuality. Good morning, sir. Amara's voice came out steadier than she felt. He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Please sit. As she perched on the edge of the seat, she noticed small changes in his appearance, slight shadows under his eyes, a tiny wrinkle in his otherwise impeccable shirt. Had he slept as poorly as she had? Michael took his time settling behind his desk, arranging papers with mechanical precision. When he finally spoke, his words were not what she expected. I've spent considerable time thinking about your situation, he said, and I believe I have a proposition that could benefit us both. Amara's hands twisted in her lap. Sir, I'm offering you a position as my personal live-in assistant. He stated it matter-of-factly, as if suggesting something entirely ordinary. The contract would be for 6 months initially, with triple your current salary. Amara blinked, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry, sir. Did you say live-in assistant? Yes, you would occupy the guest suite adjacent to my private quarters. He pulled out a thick document and slid it across the desk. The position comes with a strict code of conduct, naturally. Every aspect of your duties is outlined here. Amara's mind whirled as she scanned the first page. The salary figure made her eyes widen. It was more than she'd ever dreamed of earning. With this money, she could send Marcus to a better school, maybe even start saving for college. You'll learn discipline, Michael continued stiffly, and I'll learn patience. Something flickered in his eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps? but it vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "Why me?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. Michael's fingers drummed once on his desk, the first nervous gesture she'd ever seen from him. "You showed me something last night, Miss Johnson, not in your unfortunate choice of words, but in your determination, your willingness to do whatever it takes to protect your family. I respect that." Amara sat straighter, feeling a glimmer of pride break through her confusion. "Thank you, sir. I accept your offer. You haven't read the contract yet. I trust that God guides our paths," she said simply, "and right now, He's guided me here." Something shifted in Michael's expression. Surprise, perhaps, at her faith. He recovered quickly, launching into a detailed explanation of her duties. She would manage his household, coordinate his personal appointments, and assist with various administrative tasks. The code of conduct was indeed strict. No unauthorized visitors, no social media presence, absolute discretion about his private life. As she signed the contract, Amara could hear whispers from the outer office. Through the glass walls, she saw curious faces trying to peek in, no doubt already gossiping about the Virgin CEO and his maid. But Michael seemed completely unbothered by the attention, focusing instead on explaining her new schedule with clinical precision. "You'll move in tonight," he said. "I've arranged for your things to be transferred from the dormitory." That evening, a private elevator whisked Amara to the residential floor of Dunham Tower. The guest suite took her breath away, larger than any home she'd ever lived in, with soft carpets and elegant furnishings. The bathroom alone was bigger than her old bedroom. "Is it suitable?" Michael appeared in the doorway, watching her reaction carefully. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "Thank you, sir, for everything." He nodded, but something in his expression changed when their eyes met. The careful distance in his gaze wavered for just a moment, replaced by something warmer, more human. His chest rose and fell with a quick breath, as if something had caught him off guard. "Your schedule for tomorrow is on the desk," he said, his voice slightly rougher than usual. "We'll begin at 6 a.m. sharp." "Yes, sir. And thank you again, not just for the job, but for giving me a chance to prove myself." Michael's hand tightened on the door frame, that strange look crossing his face again. Without another word, he turned and strode away, leaving Amara to settle into her new home. Later, as she knelt beside her bed to pray, Amara heard soft footsteps in the hallway, Michael's measured pace, now familiar to her ears. She smiled, grateful for this unexpected turn of events. Whatever tomorrow might bring, she would face it with grace and determination. In his own suite, Michael stood at his window, looking out at the city lights. The sincerity in Amara's thanks had stirred something in him, an unfamiliar warmth in his chest that both unsettled and intrigued him. He'd built his walls carefully over the years, constructing a life of perfect control and distance. But somehow, this young woman's quiet dignity had found a crack in his defenses. He shook his head, trying to clear these uncomfortable thoughts. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. Yet as he prepared for bed, he couldn't quite shake the memory of her grateful smile, or the strange way his heart had responded to it. The days settled into a gentle rhythm at Dunham Tower. Each morning, Amara woke at 5 o'clock, padding softly through the quiet halls of the residential floor. She'd learned quickly that Michael preferred his coffee precisely at 6:15, not a minute earlier or later. 2 sugars, a splash of cream, served in the white porcelain cup with gold trim. The morning light would barely be touching the windows as she arranged his desk, laying out files in perfect parallel lines. She noticed how he liked everything aligned at right angles, pens perpendicular to the desk edge, papers squared precisely with the corners. These small details seemed to calm him, like a ritual that helped him face the day. She watched, quiet and observant, as he went through his own morning routine. The way he stood before the mirror, adjusting his tie with methodical precision. 3 gentle tugs, then a final smoothing motion. If it wasn't perfect, he'd start again. She learned to recognize the slight furrow in his brow that meant he wasn't satisfied, and would silently hand him a fresh tie before he asked. Most noticeable was his careful dance of avoiding physical contact. He'd step back if someone came too close, maintain a careful buffer of space in elevators. Once, when she'd reached to straighten his collar, he'd flinched away so sharply it startled them both. His eyes had held something like fear before the mask slipped back into place. "I prefer not to be touched," he'd said stiffly. "Of course, sir. I apologize." The whispers started slowly at first. Curious glances from the cleaning staff, raised eyebrows among the executives. Soon the gossip spread through the building like wildfire. Amara heard snippets as she moved through her days. Living in his penthouse. The Virgin CEO's secret maid. There must be something going on. The online tabloids were worse. Headlines screamed speculation about their relationship, some cruel, some salacious. Michael's PR team worked overtime to suppress the stories, but they persisted. Through it all, Michael maintained his icy composure, refusing to dignify the rumors with any response. But Amara saw subtle changes, the way his shoulders would relax slightly when they were alone in his office, how he began to linger over his morning coffee, asking her quiet questions about her brother Marcus, or her thoughts on the books she borrowed from his library. One evening, nearly 2 weeks into their arrangement, Amara was cleaning the study while Michael worked late. Without thinking, she began to sing softly, an old hymn her mother had loved. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound! Her voice trembled on the high notes, but the melody filled the quiet room with warmth. She didn't notice Michael had stopped typing until his voice broke the silence. "What's that song?" Amara turned, startled. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to disturb you." "No, it's—" He paused, searching for words. "It's nice. Where did you learn it?" Something in his tone made her look closer. His usual mask had slipped, revealing genuine curiosity. "My mama taught it to me," she said softly. She used to sing it while she cooked, while she cleaned. Even in the hospital, near the end. The end. Cancer took her 3 years ago. Amara's hands stilled on the bookshelf. But she never lost her faith. Said that song reminded her that grace finds us even in our darkest moments. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then something remarkable happened. His lips curved upward, just slightly. A real smile, small but genuine, transforming his face from marble to flesh. "Would you—" He cleared his throat. "Would you sing it again?" Amara's heart squeezed at the vulnerability in his request. She began again, her voice stronger this time, filling the study with the timeless melody. Michael closed his eyes, listening intently, and for a moment the walls between them, of class, of position, of past hurts, seemed to thin. Later that night, as she prepared for bed in her suite, Amara whispered to herself, "He's not made of stone after all." The realization felt important somehow, like a key turning in a lock. In his bedroom above, Michael lay awake, staring at the city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows. The hymn played in his mind, carrying echoes of something he'd thought long buried. Warmth, connection, perhaps even hope. He thought of Amara's voice, pure and unafraid, and the way she moved through his world with such quiet grace. In her own bed, Amara hummed the melody softly, thinking of her mother, of Michael's unexpected smile, of amazing grace that could melt even the coldest hearts. The night stretched between them, filled with unspoken thoughts and the lingering notes of an old, beloved song. Both lay awake, separated by floors and walls and carefully maintained distances, yet connected by the simple truth of a hymn that spoke of salvation and sweet, sweet grace. The city hummed below, a gentle backdrop to their thoughts. In the quiet darkness, something was shifting, as subtle as the change of seasons, a softening, a warming, a slow but steady thaw. The afternoon sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Dunham International's executive dining room. Amara moved quietly between tables, refilling water glasses and clearing plates. The senior executives barely noticed her presence as they lounged over their lunch meeting, ties loosened, voices carrying across the marble floors. "Did you see the latest article about our Virgin CEO?" Timothy Barnes, the chief financial officer, smirked as he waved his phone. "They're calling him the Monk of Wall Street now." Laughter rippled around the table. Amara's hand tightened on the water pitcher as she approached their table, trying to remain invisible as always. 32 years old and never even dated, chuckled Sarah Martinez, head of marketing. "It's not natural. There has to be something wrong with him." "Maybe he's secretly gay," suggested another executive, causing more snickers. "Or maybe he's just damaged goods," Barnes added, his voice cruel. "I mean, who actually believes that whole purity act? It's got to be a publicity stunt." Amara's chest tightened with each word. She thought of Michael's flinch when people tried to touch him, the careful way he held himself apart, the quiet dignity in his solitude. Before she could stop herself, she set down the water pitcher with a sharp click. "Excuse me," she said, her voice clear and steady despite her racing heart. "But you don't mock purity. It's strength, not weakness." The room fell silent. 8 pairs of stunned eyes turned to stare at her. Barnes's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. "How dare you?" he began, but Amara continued, her hands clasped tightly in front of her uniform. "Mr. Dunham leads this company with integrity and dedication. His personal choices deserve respect, not ridicule, especially from those who benefit from his leadership." The silence deepened. Someone's fork clattered against a plate. Amara's heart thundered in her chest, but she stood tall, channeling her mother's quiet strength. "You're just a maid," Barnes sputtered finally. "You have no right." "She has every right," came a cool voice from the doorway. Michael stood there, his expression unreadable. How long had he been listening? The executives scrambled to their feet, but he had already turned away. "Miss Johnson, my office, now." Amara followed him to the elevator, her legs shaking. The ride up was silent, tension crackling in the air. But when they reached his office, Michael didn't speak. He simply stood at the window, staring out at the gathering storm clouds. "I'm sorry, sir," Amara said softly. "I overstepped. I should never have—" "Why did you do it?" he interrupted, still facing the window. Amara took a deep breath. "Because it wasn't right. They don't know you. They don't understand that sometimes strength looks like standing apart. Sometimes it looks like choosing your own path, even when others mock you for it." Michael turned then, his eyes intense. "You believe that?" "Yes, sir, I do." Thunder rumbled outside, and fat drops of rain began to streak the windows. Michael checked his watch. "You should go home. It's getting late." Amara nodded and left, but instead of heading to her suite, she found herself walking outside to the building's courtyard. The rain was falling steadily now, soaking through her uniform, but she didn't care. She stood by the fountain, letting the water wash away the tension of the day. "You'll catch cold." She turned to find Michael standing a few feet away, his own suit growing dark with rain. He'd followed her. "I needed some air," she explained. "Amara." Her name on his lips made her shiver. Don't be sorry for honor. He took a step closer, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. Another step, and she could see the trembling in his hands, the vulnerability in his face. "Sir," she began, but then he was there, close enough that she could see the raindrops on his eyelashes. His hand rose slowly, hesitantly, to touch her cheek. The contact sent electricity through them both. Then, with infinite gentleness, he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was tentative at first, unsure, like a man learning a new language. But then something broke open between them, and the kiss deepened. Amara felt the tremor that ran through his body, heard the small sound he made in his throat. This was his first kiss, his first real touch, and the knowledge made her heart ache with tenderness. The moment stretched, suspended in the falling rain, until Amara suddenly remembered herself and stepped back. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, while the fountain played behind them and the rain fell steadily. Michael started, then stopped, looking lost. High above, unnoticed in an adjacent building, a camera clicked rapidly. The photographer grinned at his screen, knowing he'd just captured gold. Neither Amara nor Michael moved. The rain continued to fall, soaking them completely, but they barely noticed. The world had narrowed to this moment, this space between them, filled with questions neither knew how to ask. Finally, Michael straightened his tie, a nervous gesture she'd come to recognize, and cleared his throat. "We should go inside." Amara nodded, unable to trust her voice. They walked back separately, leaving a careful distance between them. In the elevator, she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see his hands still trembling slightly at his sides. When they reached their floor, he paused. "Good night, Ms. Johnson." "Good night, Mr. Dunham." They parted ways, each to their own rooms, but sleep would prove elusive for both. The taste of rain and first kisses lingered on their lips, and the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for morning. Dawn broke over the city with unforgiving clarity. Michael Dunham stood at his office window, watching news vans gather below like vultures. His phone hadn't stopped buzzing since 5 o'clock in the morning when the first tabloid headline hit. Virgin CEO's secret passion, caught in steamy embrace with Maid. The image splashed across every screen, showed them in the rain, his hands cupping her face, their lips meeting in what looked far more intimate than the hesitant first kiss it had been. The fountain created a romantic backdrop, making it appear staged rather than the raw, unguarded moment it truly was. His secretary burst in without knocking, her face pale. "Sir, the shareholders are demanding an emergency meeting. They're all on the conference line." Michael straightened his tie, a gesture that usually steadied him, but now felt hollow. "Put them through." The voices that filled his office were sharp with accusations and barely concealed rage. "This is a PR nightmare, Dunham. Your entire brand is built on discipline and control. The stock has dropped 8 points since opening. What were you thinking?" Michael's fingers pressed against his desk until they turned white. "Gentlemen, I assure you—" "Save it," interrupted Bernard Matthews, the head of the board. "We've called this meeting to present you with 2 options. Either remove this distraction from the company immediately, or tender your resignation." The silence that followed felt like a noose tightening. Michael's gaze drifted to the small security monitor on his desk, where he could see Amara at her desk, shoulders hunched against the whispers and stares of passing employees. "I'll handle it," he said finally, his voice as cold as winter steel. The morning crawled by in a blur of damage control meetings. The PR team drafted statements emphasizing professional boundaries. Legal prepared severance packages. Through it all, Michael felt himself retreating behind the walls he'd spent a lifetime building, each brick made of control and isolation. Around noon, a knock came at his door. Amara entered, carrying his usual lunch tray. Her hands trembled slightly, but her chin was high. "Your lunch, sir," she said quietly. Michael didn't look up from his computer. "Leave it." She hesitated. "Mr. Dunham, about last night." "Last night was a lapse in judgment," he cut in, his voice crisp and corporate. "One that cannot happen again." Amara's intake of breath was sharp, but she held her composure. "I understand, sir. HR will process your final paycheck today, including a generous severance package, provided you sign the non-disclosure agreement." "Sir, please. That will be all, Ms. Johnson." She stood there a moment longer, then set down the tray and left without another word. Only then did Michael allow himself to look up, watching her retreating form on the security monitor. His chest felt like it was filled with broken glass. The afternoon passed in a haze of meetings and phone calls. Outside his window, more reporters gathered, their cameras flashing like lightning bugs in the growing dusk. Social media buzzed with hashtags. Virgin CEO's fall and Maid who stole his heart trending nationwide. Around 7 o'clock, his intercom buzzed. "Sir, Ms. Johnson is here to say goodbye." Michael's finger hovered over the button. "Tell her I'm in a meeting." He watched on the monitor as Amara stood in the hallway, clutching a small box of personal items. She wore the same simple dress she'd arrived in months ago, but somehow she looked different, stronger, despite the sadness in her bearing. She approached his door anyway, and he could hear her soft voice through the wood. "I know you can hear me, sir. I just wanted to say—" She paused, and he could imagine her gathering her courage. "I meant what I said, sir. I'd birth you sons of faith, not flesh." The words hit him like a physical blow. He remembered that first night, when she'd offered the same thing out of desperation. Now it felt different, like a promise of something pure and true, something he'd spent his whole life searching for without knowing it. But he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't open the door. After a long moment, he heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway. On the security feed, he watched her walk through the lobby, head high despite the flashing cameras outside. She paused at the revolving door, looked back once at the security camera, at him, then stepped out into the night. The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stood and walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. Rain had started falling again, distorting the city lights into watery streams of color. For the first time in his 32 years, he felt truly alone. His phone buzzed with another message from the board, congratulating him on making the right decision. The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. He'd protected his reputation, preserved his image, maintained control. And in doing so, he'd lost something he hadn't known he was searching for until it slipped through his fingers like rain. The city stretched out below him, vast and empty. His empire of glass and steel suddenly felt like a prison of his own making. In the reflection of the window, he saw himself. Immaculate suit, perfect hair, everything in its place. The Virgin CEO, untouched and untouchable. But for the first time he wondered if the cost of such perfect control was worth the loneliness it brought. The rain continued to fall, each drop an echo of her last words. Sons of faith, not flesh. A promise of something real in a world built on appearances. But he had chosen his tower of isolation, and now he would have to live with that choice. He stood there long into the night, watching the rain fall, feeling the weight of true loneliness settle around his shoulders like a heavy cloak. The empire he'd built to keep himself safe now felt like a mausoleum, preserving nothing but the memory of what might have been. Days stretched into an endless parade of meetings and paperwork in Michael Dunham's penthouse office. The familiar rhythms that once brought him comfort now felt hollow, like going through the motions of a dance he'd forgotten the meaning of. His morning coffee, perfectly prepared by his new assistant, tasted bitter and wrong. He caught himself staring at her empty desk through his office window. The new assistant, efficient, professional, and completely forgettable, kept everything running smoothly. But she wasn't Amara. She didn't hum hymns while filing. She didn't leave tiny notes of encouragement tucked between reports. She didn't make the office feel like home. "Sir." The intercom buzzed. "The board is waiting." Michael straightened his tie, a gesture that used to center him but now felt meaningless. "On my way." The headlines had finally begun to fade. Virgin CEO was no longer trending. His PR team had successfully spun the story into a non-event. Everything was back to normal, except it wasn't. At night, the penthouse felt bigger, emptier. He'd catch himself listening for the soft padding of her feet in the hallway, the quiet click of her door, the muffled sound of her prayers before bed. The silence that replaced these sounds was deafening. Sleep became elusive. He spent hours standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city pulse below. Sometimes he imagined he could see all the way to Alabama, where she was now. The thought always made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't explain. "Your 3 o'clock is here," his new assistant announced one afternoon. "Cancel it," he said, surprising them both. Cancel everything for the rest of the day. Alone in his office, he opened his laptop and typed rural Alabama churches into the search bar. He stopped himself before clicking search. What was he doing? This wasn't part of the plan. This wasn't controlled. This wasn't safe. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away, Amara stepped out onto the worn wooden porch of her childhood home. The morning air was thick with humidity and the smell of magnolias. Jordan's laughter carried from inside, where he was getting ready for school. "Sissy!" he called out, bounding through the screen door. At 11 years old, he was all gangly limbs and bright eyes. "You're gonna be late for your teaching." Amara smiled, ruffling his hair. "It's not really teaching, sugar, just helping kids with their homework." But to her, it was everything. The church basement might not have marble floors or crystal chandeliers, but it had something the Dunham Tower never did. Life. Real, messy, beautiful life. Every afternoon, she sat with local children at rickety tables, helping them sound out words and solve math problems. Their eager faces reminded her of Jordan at that age, how he'd struggled with reading until their mama had sat with him night after night, patient and loving. "Miss Amara," little Tamika asked one day, "how come you came back from the big city?" Amara's hand stilled on the workbook they were sharing. "Sometimes," she said carefully, "God has different plans than we do. Sometimes what looks like an ending is really a beginning." At night, after Jordan was asleep, Amara would sit on the porch swing, listening to crickets and watching stars appear. She thought about Michael in his tower of glass and steel, wondered if he ever looked at these same stars. Her prayers for him became a nightly ritual. Not prayers of petition or want, but prayers of peace and healing. "Lord," she'd whisper, "help him find what he's really looking for. Help him see that walls don't make a home." Jordan would sometimes join her on the porch, his presence a quiet comfort. "You miss it there?" he asked one evening. "Parts of it," she admitted, "but I missed you more. That man on TV, the one they wrote all those stories about, was he nice to you?" Amara thought carefully before answering. "He was lonely. Sometimes lonely people forget how to be nice, even to themselves." The church basement program grew. Word spread about the young woman who'd come back from the big city to help local children. Parents started dropping by with cookies and casseroles, staying to chat. The basement became a place of community, of hope. Amara used some of her savings to buy supplies, pencils, notebooks, second-hand books. It wasn't much, but seeing the children's faces light up when they mastered a difficult problem made every penny worth it. One evening, as she was locking up the church basement, Pastor Williams stopped by. "The Lord works in mysterious ways," he said, smiling. "Sometimes we think we're climbing up, only to find our real purpose back down here on the ground." Amara nodded, thinking of the Dunham Tower reaching into the clouds. "Yes, sir. Though sometimes I wonder if the height isn't the problem. It's what we build the towers for." Back in New York, Michael's perfectly ordered world continued its clockwork rotation. Board meetings, contracts, acquisitions. But something had shifted inside him, like a gear slightly out of alignment. The precise machinery of his life kept running, but the sound was off. He found himself taking different routes through the building, avoiding the lobby where he'd first seen her cleaning up broken glass. The top-floor corridor where she'd made her desperate plea that first night became strictly off-limits. His own reflection became a stranger. The careful haircut, the immaculate suits, the rigid posture. Sometimes, late at night, he'd loosen his tie and just breathe, remembering the sound of her hymns floating through the empty halls. The media had moved on to newer scandals, but occasionally a reporter would try to revive the story. "Mr. Dunham, any comment on the rumors that the Maid incident was actually a carefully orchestrated PR stunt?" He'd respond with his practiced smile and rehearsed line. "Dunham International remains focused on creating value for our shareholders and serving our global clients." The words tasted like chalk in his mouth. One night, unable to sleep, he found himself in the guest suite where she'd stayed. It had been cleaned and redesigned, all traces of her presence erased. But standing there in the darkness, he could almost hear her soft voice singing hymns of praise and hope. He picked up his phone, opened his email, started typing her name, then deleted it. What would he say? That his empire felt empty? That his control was crumbling? That he missed the sound of her faith echoing through his halls of doubt? Instead, he walked to his window and looked out at the city lights blurring through the rain. Somewhere far away in a small Alabama town, Amara was probably sitting on her porch, looking at the same sky, teaching children the same values of faith and perseverance she'd tried to show him. The contrast couldn't have been starker. His cold penthouse versus her warm community, his lonely vigils versus her nurturing service, his walls of glass versus her open heart. In trying to protect everything, he realized, he might have lost the only thing that mattered. 3 months crawled by like honey in winter. In the gleaming tower of Dunham International, something had shifted. The precise machinery of Michael's empire developed hairline cracks, invisible to outsiders, but widening day by day. His executive assistant noticed first. Michael's shirts, once crisp enough to slice paper, showed wrinkles. His perfectly styled hair grew slightly too long at the edges. Small things, but in a man known for military precision, they screamed like sirens. During the quarterly earnings call, Michael stumbled over numbers he once recited in his sleep. "Our third quarter projections show—" He paused, shuffling papers, his voice distant. "Show a slight." Another pause. The line crackled with uncomfortable silence. Board members exchanged glances. The Virgin CEO's legendary focus had evaporated like morning dew. Expansion plans gathered dust on his desk. Merger proposals went unanswered. The man who once replied to emails within minutes now took days, sometimes weeks. "Mr. Dunham?" His new assistant knocked gently. "The Tokyo team is waiting for your video call." Michael stood at his floor-to-ceiling window, watching pigeons circle below. "Cancel it," he said softly. "Cancel everything today." Whispers spread through the office like wildfire. The CEO spent hours staring out windows, his shoulders slumped, his tie loose. Sometimes, late at night, security cameras caught him wandering empty corridors, pausing near the spot where a maid once sang hymns. Meanwhile, in Alabama, Amara's little church basement transformed into a beacon of hope. Children sprawled on donated carpets, pencils scratching worksheets while she moved among them, offering gentle encouragement. "Miss Amara." Little Sarah tugged her sleeve. "I did it. I solved all the fractions." Amara's face lit up. "Let me see, sweetie." She crouched beside the girl, examining the neat rows of numbers. "Look at that beautiful work. Your mama's going to be so proud." The basement walls, once bare, now wore children's artwork like a rainbow gallery. In one corner, a donated piano waited for afternoon music lessons. The room smelled of pencil shavings, hope, and the occasional batch of cookies brought by grateful parents. Mrs. Thompson, whose son had improved 3 grade levels under Amara's guidance, brought a steaming casserole one evening. "You're an angel," she declared, setting it down. "Tommy never cared about school before. Now he can't wait for tutoring." Amara smiled, adjusting a crooked drawing on the wall. "The children do all the hard work. I just show them they can." The local community embraced her vision. When she organized a meal drive for elderly neighbors, volunteers flooded in. When she started simple music classes, teaching the hymns her mother once sang, parents stayed to listen, swaying gently to ancient melodies of faith. One crisp afternoon, as autumn painted the trees gold, a silver rental car pulled up outside the church. A woman in a smart blazer stepped out, notebook in hand. "Amara Johnson," she called. "I'm Rebecca Chen from the Daily Chronicle. We'd love to do a feature on you, the woman behind the CEO scandal." Amara looked up from where she was helping a child with multiplication tables. "I'm sorry," she said softly but firmly. "But there's no story here. It's not about me." The journalist persisted. "Your influence on Michael Dunham has become legendary. His company's stock has dropped 15%. People want to know. What people need," Amara interrupted gently, "is to help these children believe in themselves. That's the only story that matters." Later that night, after the children had gone home, Amara sat at her small kitchen table working on lesson plans. The TV hummed quietly in the background until a familiar face caught her eye. There was Michael, but not the Michael she remembered. His hair fell slightly over his forehead. His suit jacket hung loose on his frame. Dark circles shadowed his eyes as he pushed through a crowd of reporters. The news anchor's voice cut through her thoughts. Dunham International faces growing concerns as CEO Michael Dunham shows signs of personal crisis. Sources close to the company report missed meetings, delayed decisions, and erratic behavior from the once legendary Virgin CEO. Amara's pencil stopped moving. Her heart squeezed tight in her chest. "Oh, Michael," she whispered. "You're lost, aren't you?" The camera zoomed in on his face as he climbed into a waiting car. She recognized that look, the same lost expression he'd worn the night she sang hymns in his empty halls. A man drowning in his own fortress. Setting aside her lesson plans, Amara pulled out a fresh sheet of paper. Her hand trembled slightly as she began to write. "Dear Mr. Dunham, I pray this letter finds you well. The children here taught me something today about numbers. They said sometimes you have to break things down to build them back up right. Made me think of you and all those big numbers you chase. But you taught me something too, that night by the fountain. You showed me that behind every wall there's a heart wanting to be heard. I still believe that. The Lord keeps bringing you to my mind during prayer time. Not the CEO in the fancy suit, but the man who smiled when he heard an old hymn. The one who saw value in a broken maid with nothing but faith to offer." Her pen moved steadily now, pouring out words of encouragement and hope. Not a love letter, not a plea for return, but a gentle reminder that even in the deepest valleys, Grace still flows. Outside her window, crickets sang their evening symphony. Inside, a simple letter carried the weight of unspoken prayers, of faith that saw beyond towers and titles to the hurting soul beneath. The TV droned on about stock prices and shareholder concerns, but Amara kept writing, her words flowing like a healing stream toward a parched heart in a distant city of glass and steel. The next morning dawned clear and bright in Alabama. Amara walked to the post office, her letter carefully sealed in a cream-colored envelope. She'd written the address in her best handwriting. Michael Dunham, Chief Executive Officer, Dunham International Holdings, 125 Park Avenue, New York City. Miss Betty, the elderly postmaster who'd known Amara since childhood, smiled as she weighed the envelope. "Special letter, honey?" "Just words that needed saying." Amara replied softly, counting out exact change from her worn wallet. "First class or regular mail?" Amara hesitated. The difference was $3 she could spend on supplies for the children, but something in her heart urged speed. "First class, please." As she watched Miss Betty stamp the envelope, Amara whispered a quiet prayer. "Lord, let these words find the heart they're meant for." The letter began its journey north, passing through sorting facilities and delivery trucks, while life continued its steady rhythm. Amara threw herself into her work with the children, but each evening she wondered if he'd received her words yet. 1 week later, in the gleaming tower of Dunham International, Michael sat at his massive desk, mechanically sorting through the day's mail. His assistant had flagged several urgent matters, but his eyes caught on a simple envelope with familiar handwriting. His hands trembled slightly as he picked it up. The return address confirmed what his racing heart already knew. It was from her. For several long moments, he simply held it, afraid to break the seal and face whatever judgment lay within. Finally, alone in his office as evening shadows lengthened across Manhattan, he carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside carried a faint scent of lavender, the same subtle fragrance he'd noticed when she used to organize his files. "Dear Mr. Dunham," he read, his throat tightening at the formal address. "I pray this letter finds you well. The children here taught me something today about numbers. They said sometimes you have to break things down to build them back up right. Made me think of you and all those big numbers you chase. But you taught me something too. That night by the fountain. You showed me that behind every wall there's a heart wanting to be heard. I still believe that. The Lord keeps bringing you to my mind during prayer time. Not the CEO in the fancy suit, but the man who smiled when he heard an old hymn. The one who saw value in a broken maid with nothing but faith to offer. I want to thank you for your kindness during my time at Dunham International. You gave me dignity when others saw only my uniform. You offered opportunity when others saw only limitations. Those months changed my life in ways I'm still discovering. Please don't carry guilt about how things ended. The world may chase scandal, but God chases hearts, and He's not finished with either of us yet. Remember what I told you about my mama? She used to say that the only sons worth having are those of faith, mercy, and courage. I see those qualities in you, Mr. Dunham, even if you don't see them yourself yet. The children here remind me of you sometimes. They're so afraid of being wrong that they forget to try being right. But when they finally trust themselves, when they let go of that fear, they shine so bright it takes my breath away. I'm learning to teach them what you taught me, that dignity isn't in our position, but in our purpose, that strength isn't in control, but in surrender, that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit we're lost. The newspapers call what happened a scandal. I call it a moment of grace, because in that rain, by that fountain, God showed both of us something true about ourselves. I forgive you, Mr. Dunham. I forgave you the moment you turned away, because that's what love does. It forgives, it hopes, it endures. May God bless and keep you, Amara Johnson. Michael read the letter again. And again, Each time, new words seemed to leap from the page, striking deeper into his carefully constructed walls. The third time through, those final words, "I forgive you," hit him like a physical blow. His chest tightened, his vision blurred with unexpected tears. The careful control he'd maintained since childhood cracked and crumbled. For the first time in 25 years, since that terrible night his father walked out, Michael Dunham fell to his knees. The plush carpet caught him as he collapsed beside his desk, letter clutched in his trembling hands. "God," he whispered, voice breaking on the unfamiliar word. "God, The prayers wouldn't come. He didn't know the right words, the proper format. But something in Amara's letter had awakened a desperate need to speak to the one she trusted so completely. "I don't know how to do this," he continued, words tumbling out raw and unplanned. "I don't know how to be anything except what I've built myself to be, but it's not enough anymore. Nothing's enough anymore." Tears fell freely now, spotting his perfectly pressed trousers. "Help me," he pleaded. "Help me find my way back to whatever it was I felt that night in the rain. To whatever she sees in me that I can't see myself." The prayer continued, halting and honest until the sky outside his window had darkened to deep purple. His knees ached from the hard floor, but something in his soul felt lighter, as if chains he hadn't known he wore had begun to loosen. That night, in his penthouse apartment, Michael dreamed, not his usual dreams of falling or failing, but of Amara. She stood in sunlight, surrounded by children's laughter. Her smile was radiant as she helped a small boy with his reading, her patience and love evident in every gesture. In the dream, she looked up and saw him watching. Her smile widened, not in judgment or accusation, but in welcome. He woke just before dawn, the dream still vivid in his mind. For the first time in months, his thoughts were clear. The path forward shone like a beacon through the fog of his confusion. Reaching for his phone, he called his assistant. "Cancel all my meetings today," he ordered, "and book me on the first flight to Alabama." "Sir?" his assistant questioned, startled by the sudden decisiveness in his voice. "The board meeting." "Can wait," Michael interrupted. "Some things are more important than business." He stood at his window, watching the sun rise over the city. The man who'd spent his life building walls was finally ready to tear them down. It was time to find Amara and set things right. The sleek black Mercedes felt out of place as Michael guided it away from the familiar grid of New York City. He'd left behind his driver, his security detail, and his carefully constructed world of glass and steel. For the first time in his adult life, he was truly alone. As skyscrapers gave way to suburbs, then to rolling countryside, Michael felt the tight knot in his chest begin to loosen. His perfectly pressed suit jacket hung forgotten in the back seat, his crisp white shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. The tie he'd started with lay discarded beside it. Hour after hour, the landscape changed. Highways became state roads, then county routes. He stopped at a small gas station in Virginia, where the attendant barely glanced at him, more interested in his crossword puzzle than the man Forbes magazine had featured on its cover. "Need anything else?" the older man asked, not looking up. "Just directions," Michael replied, realizing he'd never asked for directions in his life. His GPS had lost signal 20 minutes back. The man finally looked up, squinting at Michael's expensive watch and vehicle. "Where are you headed?" "Alabama. Small town called Pine Grove." "Long way from home, ain't you?" The man chuckled, sketching out directions on the back of a receipt. "Follow these roads. They ain't pretty, but they'll get you there." Back in his car, Michael studied the handwritten notes. The perfectionist in him wanted to wait for his GPS to reconnect, but something made him fold the paper carefully and follow the old man's instructions instead. The roads grew narrower, dustier. His black Mercedes collected a fine coating of red Alabama clay as he navigated the final stretches. Children on bicycles stared as he passed, probably wondering what such a fancy car was doing in their quiet town. Pine Grove revealed itself gradually, a scatter of modest homes, a main street with more churches than stores, and finally, the community center. It was exactly as she'd described in her letter. A former church hall painted a cheerful sky blue, its paint slightly faded, but somehow more beautiful for its imperfection. The sound of children's laughter drifted through open windows. Michael parked across the street, taking a moment to steady himself. He'd traded his usual business attire for jeans and a casual button-down shirt. But he still felt overdressed, out of place. A group of children played in the small yard, their energy focused on a tired-looking swing set. One of the swings hung crooked, its chain clearly broken. Without thinking, Michael crossed the street and approached the fence. "Careful with that swing," he called out to a small boy about to test the broken one. "It needs fixing." Children turned to stare at him, 5 or 6 of them, ranging from maybe 6 to 12 years old. A little girl with braids spoke first. "Are you good at fixing things, mister?" Michael smiled, surprising himself with how natural it felt. "I can try. Do you have any tools?" "Miss Amara keeps them in the shed." Another child volunteered. "I'm Tommy, I can show you." "I'm Mike," he corrected himself, realizing his full name might carry unwanted weight. "Lead the way, Tommy." The tools were old but serviceable. Michael rolled up his sleeves further and got to work, remembering skills he hadn't used since helping his grandfather repair things in their garage before everything changed. The children gathered around, fascinated. "Mr. Mike, can you fix my bicycle next?" "Mr. Mike, why is your car so shiny?" "Mr. Mike, are you going to stay and help Miss Amara?" He answered their questions patiently, finding unexpected joy in their curiosity. His hands grew dirty, his careful hairstyle disheveled in the warm breeze, but he felt more himself than he had in years. The screen door creaked. Michael looked up, and there she was. Amara stood frozen in the doorway, one hand still on the handle. She wore a simple sundress, her hair tied back with a colorful scarf. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, him kneeling by the swing set, surrounded by children, tool belt at his waist. The world seemed to pause. Then Michael stood slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans. The children looked between them, sensing something important was happening. "Hi," he said softly, then smiled. "I came to see the sons you gave me." Amara's hand flew to her mouth, recognizing her own words from the letter. Tears gathered in her eyes, but she blinked them away. "Tommy," she called, her voice steady despite her emotion. "Why don't you take everyone inside for afternoon snack? I need to talk to Mr. Mike for a minute." The children protested, but obeyed, filing past her with curious backward glances. When they were alone, Amara stepped into the yard. "You got my letter?" she said. "I did." Michael took a step closer. It changed everything. They talked as the afternoon faded into evening, sitting on the newly repaired swing set. He told her about his prayer in the office, about the dream that followed. She shared stories about the children, about the community that had welcomed her home, about the healing she'd found in helping others. "The board wants me to step down," he admitted. "They say I've lost focus." "Have you?" "No." He met her eyes. "I've found it. For the first time in my life, I know exactly what matters." The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside the community center, they could hear children laughing as they finished their homework and gathered their things to head home. They stood together by the fence, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Their hands brushed, sending tiny sparks of electricity through both of them. The touch was brief, but full of promise. Like the first notes of a familiar hymn, like a prayer finally answered. The children's laughter echoed in the distance, carried on the evening breeze. It sounded like hope. It sounded like home. The morning sun filtered through the community center's kitchen windows, casting warm rectangles of light across the worn linoleum floor. Michael, still in his casual clothes from yesterday, stood beside Amara at the counter, carefully cracking eggs into a large mixing bowl. "I never knew making pancakes could be so complicated," he admitted, fishing out a piece of eggshell with focused determination. Amara couldn't help but smile as she measured flour into another bowl. "You mean to tell me the great Michael Dunham never learned to cook? Takeout and personal chefs." He shrugged, but there was no pride in his voice anymore. "I missed out on a lot of simple things." The kitchen filled with the sounds and smells of breakfast preparation. Children would be arriving soon for the morning program, many coming from homes where breakfast wasn't guaranteed. Amara had started serving morning meals 3 months ago, stretching her modest budget as far as it would go. "You're good with them," she said softly, whisking the batter. "The children, I mean. Yesterday with the swing set." "They make it easy," Michael replied, his voice thoughtful. "They don't care about my title or my bank account. They just want someone to listen and help fix things." The first batch of pancakes sizzled on the griddle as early morning sunshine streamed through the windows. Michael watched Amara move efficiently through the kitchen, her movements graceful and purposeful. She hummed softly, that same hymn he remembered from their nights in New York. "I've been thinking," he said, carefully flipping a pancake as she'd shown him. "About purpose, about what matters." Amara paused, sensing the weight in his words. "And what did you find?" "This place." He gestured around them. "What you're doing here, it matters. Real change, one child at a time." He took a deep breath. "I want to help expand it. Fund centers like this across the country. Not as a charity project, but as a true partnership." The spatula froze in Amara's hand. "Michael, it's not about romance," he added quickly, though his heart skipped at their proximity. "It's about purpose, about doing something meaningful with all these resources I've been blessed with." Amara set down her spatula, concern creasing her brow. "People will talk. They'll say I manipulated you, that this was my plan all along." "Let them talk," Michael said firmly. "I'm done living for other people's opinions." But Amara stepped back, shaking her head. "You don't understand. In my world, reputation is sometimes all we have. I can't risk the children being hurt by scandal." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft sizzle of pancakes. Outside, they could hear the first excited voices of children arriving for breakfast. "Come with me," Michael said suddenly. "There's somewhere we should talk about this." After asking one of the regular volunteers to watch the kitchen, they walked together through the dewy morning to a nearby field where Jordan often played with the younger children. The grass was still wet with morning dew, and the air held that special stillness that belongs only to early hours. Jordan was there already, teaching a group of smaller children how to kick a soccer ball. Despite his heart condition, he moved with careful joy, his face lit up with the simple pleasure of the game. "Look at them," Michael said softly. "That's what matters, not stock prices or board meetings or what the tabloids say." Amara watched her brother, her heart full. "He's gotten so much stronger since we came home." "You did that," Michael said. "You created a place where he could thrive." He turned to face her fully. Amara, you taught me what love really means. It's not about taking, it's about giving. All my life I thought love was something to guard against, something that made you weak. But watching you these past months, even from afar, I finally understand. Tears gathered in Amara's eyes as she looked at him. This man who had changed so much, whose carefully constructed walls had crumbled to reveal something real and beautiful underneath. How would it work? She asked finally. The expansion? You'd be in charge, he said immediately. Full creative control. I'd provide funding and business expertise, but the heart of it, the mission, the programs, that would all be yours. We'd start small, maybe 2 or 3 new centers in nearby communities. Learn what works, what doesn't. Grow organically. The morning sun climbed higher as they talked through details. Jordan and the children played nearby, their laughter carrying across the field. Gradually, Amara's hesitation began to fade as she saw the sincerity in Michael's eyes, heard the careful thought he'd put into the plan. Yes, she said finally, smiling through tears. Yes, we can try. The news spread quickly through the small town. At first, there were whispers and suspicious glances when Michael appeared at the hardware store, buying supplies for repairs. But day by day, as they watched him work alongside local volunteers, hammering nails, painting walls, fixing broken furniture, the skepticism began to fade. He showed up early each morning, trading his designer suits for work clothes, his manicured hands becoming calloused and paint-stained. He learned everyone's names, listened to their stories, shared meals at the center's worn tables. One afternoon, as they took a break from painting the community room, old Mr. Thompson, who had been one of the most vocal critics, approached Michael. "Never thought I'd say this," the elderly man said gruffly. "But you're all right, son. Different from what we expected." Michael wiped paint from his hands. "What did you expect?" "Some rich fellow playing at charity," Mr. Thompson admitted. "But you work. You listen. You respect our Amara and treat these children like they matter." "They do matter," Michael said simply. "More than anything." The old man nodded, a small smile crinkling his weathered face. "Well then, come on. These walls won't paint themselves." As they worked side by side, Michael caught glimpses of Amara through the windows, teaching a group of children on the front steps. She looked up and met his eyes, her smile warm and real. In that moment, surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and the sounds of community, Michael knew he'd finally found his true purpose, not in boardrooms or billion-dollar deals, but here, helping to build something that would last. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the soccer field as Jordan led his usual practice with the younger children. The air was thick with humidity, typical for an Alabama summer, but the kids didn't seem to mind as they chased the ball with unbridled enthusiasm. Amara watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride as her brother demonstrated a new passing technique. Michael stood beside her, his sleeves rolled up and tie long discarded, having just finished installing new shelving in the center's library. "He's got a natural way with them," Michael observed, watching Jordan patiently correct a young boy's stance. Amara nodded, smiling. "Mama always said he was born to teach." She paused, shading her eyes against the setting sun. "Though maybe we should wrap up soon. He looks a little tired." Jordan's movements had grown slightly sluggish, his usual bounce diminished. Still he persisted, determined to finish the practice session properly. "Okay, everyone," Jordan called out, his voice carrying across the field. "Last drill and then—" The words died in his throat. Jordan stumbled, the soccer ball rolling away forgotten. His hand clutched his chest, face contorting in pain. "Jordan?" Amara's voice cracked with sudden fear. Time seemed to slow as Jordan's knees buckled. He crumpled to the grass like a puppet with cut strings. "Jordan!" Amara's scream pierced the evening air as she sprinted toward her brother. The children scattered, some crying in fear, others calling for help. Michael was already moving, his long legs carrying him swiftly across the field. He reached Jordan seconds after Amara, who had gathered her brother's limp form into her arms. "He's barely breathing," she sobbed, pressing her hand against Jordan's clammy forehead. "Please, Jordan, baby, open your eyes." Michael's CEO instincts kicked in, his mind racing through options. "The local clinic's 10 minutes away. My car's faster than waiting for an ambulance." Without hesitation, he scooped Jordan into his arms. The boy felt terrifyingly light, his breathing shallow and irregular. Amara ran alongside them to the parking lot where Michael's rental car waited. "Mrs. Thompson," Michael called to the elderly volunteer who had emerged from the center. "Please take care of the children. We'll call as soon as we know anything." The drive to the clinic was a blur of panic and prayer. Michael broke every speed limit, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching back to squeeze Amara's trembling fingers as she cradled Jordan's head in her lap. "Stay with us, buddy," Michael murmured, his eyes darting between the road and the rearview mirror. "We're almost there." The small clinic's emergency entrance was mercifully empty when they arrived. Dr. Peterson, the town's primary physician for 3 decades, took one look at Jordan and immediately called for assistance. "How long has he had the heart condition?" the doctor asked sharply as nurses transferred Jordan to a gurney. "Heart condition." Amara's voice shook. "What heart condition?" Dr. Peterson's face grew grave as he quickly examined Jordan, listening to his chest with practiced efficiency. "There's significant arrhythmia and what sounds like a structural abnormality. Has he never been diagnosed?" We couldn't afford regular checkups," Amara whispered, her words heavy with sudden, crushing guilt. "He'd get tired sometimes, but I thought—" The doctor's expression softened with understanding, but his tone remained urgent. "This is serious. He needs specialized cardiac care immediately. The nearest facility equipped to handle this is in Atlanta, but I'll charter a medical transport." Michael interrupted, already pulling out his phone. "Money is not an issue. Just tell me what he needs." The next hour passed in a whirlwind of activity. Michael's resources and connections proved invaluable as he arranged for an emergency medical flight, while Dr. Peterson stabilized Jordan for transport. Amara never left her brother's side, holding his small hand and whispering prayers through her tears. "The medical team will be here in 20 minutes," Michael informed them, ending another call. "They'll fly us directly to Atlanta Children's Hospital. They're already prepping for his arrival." Amara looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed but grateful. "Michael, I can't possibly afford—" "Don't." He cut her off gently. "Please, let me do this." The flight to Atlanta was tense, the medical team monitoring Jordan's vital signs constantly. Amara sat rigid, her hand clasped tightly in Michael's, both watching every beep of the heart monitor like it was their lifeline. At the hospital, things moved quickly. A team of cardiac specialists whisked Jordan away for immediate evaluation, leaving Amara and Michael in a sterile waiting room that seemed designed to amplify anxiety. Hours crawled by. The comfortable chairs did nothing to ease their distress. Coffee grew cold in untouched cups. Every time the door opened, they both jerked to attention, hoping for news. "This is my fault," Michael said suddenly, breaking the heavy silence. His voice was thick with self-recrimination. "If I hadn't fired you, if you'd had proper health care, coverage, maybe he'd have been diagnosed and treated sooner." Amara turned to him, tears streaming down her face. She didn't pull away when he wrapped his arms around her, instead pressing her face into his shoulder. "No," she said softly, her voice muffled against his shirt. Maybe God was leading us here, to this hospital, to these doctors. He works in ways we don't always understand. Michael held her closer, feeling her tears soak through to his skin. His own eyes burned as he remembered Jordan's laugh, his generous spirit, the way he made everyone around him feel special. The night stretched on endlessly. They held hands, drawing strength from each other as machines beeped softly in distant corridors. Sometimes they prayed together, their whispered words mixing with the sterile hospital sounds. Sometimes they sat in silence, lost in their own thoughts but anchored by their joined hands. Every now and then, a nurse would check on them, offering updates that revealed little but meant everything. Jordan was stable. The doctors were working. They would know more soon. In those long hours, status and scandal ceased to matter. They were simply two people united in their love for a bright-spirited boy who had touched their lives in profound ways. Michael's carefully constructed walls crumbled completely as he watched Amara's silent tears, feeling her pain as if it were his own. The waiting room slowly emptied and filled again as other families came and went with their own dramas and outcomes. But Michael and Amara remained, keeping their vigil, their hands clasped tight, waiting for news about the boy who had brought them together in ways neither could have imagined. As midnight approached in the hospital's sterile corridors, Michael found himself drawn to the small chapel on the ground floor. His footsteps echoed in the empty hallway as he made his way down, his designer suit wrinkled from hours of anxious waiting. The chapel door creaked softly as he pushed it open, revealing a humble space lit by flickering electric candles. The familiar scent of wood polish and old hymnals hit him like a physical force, transporting him back 25 years. He'd last knelt in a chapel like this when he was 7 years old, praying desperately for his mother's life. That time, his prayers had gone unanswered. Michael's legs felt heavy as he approached the front pew. For a moment he stood frozen, pride and fear warring within him. Then slowly, his knees bent. The polished wood was hard against his legs as he knelt, his hands gripping the pew in front of him. "God," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I know I haven't spoken to you in a long time." His shoulders began to shake. "But please, please don't take Jordan. He's just a boy. He's pure and good and—" Tears spilled down his cheeks, unchecked. "He makes the world better just by being in it." The words tumbled out faster now, raw and honest. "I'll do anything. I'll give everything. My money, my company. I'll dedicate my life to service. Just please." His voice broke completely. "Please don't let him die." In the dim light, Michael's carefully maintained facade crumbled entirely. Years of rigid control dissolved into quiet sobs as he pressed his forehead against his clasped hands. For the first time since childhood, he allowed himself to be truly vulnerable before God. The chapel door opened quietly, and soft footsteps approached. Michael didn't need to look up to know it was Amara. He felt her presence as she knelt beside him, her own prayer joining his in the hushed space. "Lord?" she prayed, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "You know Jordan's heart better than any surgeon. Guide their hands. Give him strength." She reached out and took Michael's hand, squeezing it gently. "And Lord, thank you for bringing us together in this moment, for teaching us that we're stronger when we surrender our pride and trust in you." They remained there, side by side, their prayers intertwining in the quiet chapel. Sometimes they spoke aloud, sometimes they sat in contemplative silence. The hours crept by, marked only by the soft ticking of a wall clock and the distant sounds of the hospital beyond the chapel doors. As the first hints of dawn began to filter through the stained glass windows, Michael realized something had shifted within him. The crushing weight of control he'd carried for so long had lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace. Whatever happened, he was no longer alone in his struggle. Amara must have sensed the change in him. She turned, her eyes soft with understanding. "You've been carrying so much for so long," she whispered. "I thought I had to," he admitted. "I thought being strong meant never showing weakness, never needing anyone." He looked down at their still joined hands. "I was wrong about so many things." The chapel door opened, startling them both. A nurse stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath. "Mr. Dunham, Ms. Johnson, the doctor's looking for you." They hurried back to the surgical floor, hands still clasped tightly together. Dr. Carter was waiting for them, and the moment they saw his smile, hope bloomed in their hearts. "The surgery was successful," he announced, his eyes twinkling with genuine joy. "Jordan came through beautifully. We were able to repair the structural defect in his heart, and his prognosis is excellent." Amara's legs gave out, and Michael caught her, pulling her into a tight embrace. They clung to each other, crying and laughing at the same time as relief washed over them in waves. "When can we see him?" Amara asked, wiping her eyes. "He's in recovery now. Give us about an hour to get him settled in his room, and then you can visit briefly. He'll be groggy from the anesthesia, but he's already asked for both of you." The next hour passed in a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Michael arranged for the best post-operative care available, while Amara contacted their friends back home. When they finally received permission to visit Jordan's room, they paused outside the door, gathering their composure. "Ready?" Michael asked softly. Amara nodded, squeezing his hand one more time before they entered. Jordan lay in a hospital bed that seemed too big for his small frame, surrounded by monitoring equipment. But his face lit up when he saw them, and despite the tubes and bandages, his smile was as bright as ever. "Brother Mike!" he called out weakly, reaching for Michael's hand. "You came back." Michael's carefully maintained composure shattered at those simple words. Tears rolled down his face as he gently took Jordan's hand. "I'll never leave again," he whispered fiercely. "I promise." Amara stood on Jordan's other side, stroking his hair softly. "How are you feeling, baby brother?" "Tired," Jordan admitted. "But the doctors said they fixed my heart." He looked between them with drowsy wisdom. "I think they fixed more than just my heart, though." Michael and Amara exchanged a glance over Jordan's bed, both understanding the profound truth in the boy's simple observation. Through this trial, through their surrender to something greater than themselves, healing had begun in all their hearts. Jordan's eyes started to drift closed, the medication pulling him back toward sleep. But his hands remained firmly clasped in theirs, forming a circle of love and trust that would never be broken again. The autumn sun painted Manhattan's skyline in golden hues as Michael Dunham stood before a forest of microphones in Dunham International's grand conference room. His appearance had changed subtly but significantly, his usual severe, slick back replaced by a softer style, his trademark charcoal suit exchanged for a warm navy blue. The room buzzed with anticipation, packed with board members, journalists, and curious onlookers. Back in Alabama, Amara gathered the children in their sky-blue community center, all eyes fixed on the small television she'd positioned on a folding table. Jordan sat beside her, still recovering but growing stronger each day, his hand warm in hers. "Good morning," Michael began, his voice carrying none of its former icy precision. 3 months ago, I thought I knew what success meant. I believed it was measured in stock prices and profit margins. He paused, a gentle smile touching his lips. I was wrong. The crowd stirred, cameras clicking rapidly as he continued. Today, I'm announcing the creation of the Sons of Grace Foundation. I will be donating 50% of my personal wealth approximately $2 billion, to establish free education centers across America. He looked directly into the main camera, knowing Amara would be watching. These centers will provide tutoring, meals, and support to children who need it most. Gasps rippled through the New York conference room. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but Michael stood firm, his conviction evident in every word. This foundation is inspired by two extraordinary people who taught me the true meaning of dignity and purpose. A young boy named Jordan, whose courage in the face of illness showed me what real strength looks like, and his sister Amara, whose faith and compassion revealed to me what real wealth truly is. In Alabama, the children cheered, hugging Amara as tears streamed down her face. Jordan beamed with pride, squeezing his sister's hand. Some of you may remember Ms. Johnson as the maid who caused a scandal. Michael continued, his voice taking on an edge of challenge. But I remember her as the woman who showed me that love isn't about taking. It's about giving. She created a haven for children in her community with nothing but determination and grace. Now imagine what she could do with real resources. The reporters leaned forward, sensing the story behind the story. But Michael wasn't finished. To those who question this decision, I say this. I've seen the future of America in a small Alabama community center. I've seen it in children helping each other with homework, sharing meals, and lifting each other up. That's the kind of success worth investing in. As he spoke, slides appeared behind him, showing architectural plans for the new centers, each designed to be warm and welcoming, with plenty of natural light and space for both learning and play. The first center will open in Birmingham, Alabama, with 20 more locations to follow within the year. Each will be staffed by local community leaders who understand their neighborhood's needs. This isn't charity, it's investment in our shared future. Back in Alabama, one of the younger children tugged at Amara's sleeve. Miss Amara, does this mean we get a bigger building? She nodded, unable to speak through her tears of joy. The next day, Michael's private jet touched down at the small regional airport. He drove himself to the community center in a modest rental car, carrying a leather briefcase full of documents. The children swarmed him as he entered, calling out, "Brother Mike!" with genuine affection. Amara stood back, watching with a full heart as he high-fived and hugged each child. When he finally made his way to her, his eyes were bright with purpose. "I brought you something," he said, pulling out a thick document from his briefcase. "The Foundation's incorporation papers. They need one more signature. Yours." Amara took the papers with trembling hands, reading the title, Co-founder and Executive Director. "This was always your dream," Michael said softly, his voice full of admiration. "I'm just following your light. You showed me the way when I was lost in the dark." The document represented more than just a job title or a partnership. It was recognition of Amara's vision, her unwavering faith in the power of love and education to transform lives. As she signed her name next to his, their hands brushed, and they shed a look of deep understanding. "The Sons of Grace," she whispered, running her fingers over the Foundation's name, "because every child deserves the chance to grow in grace. And because you taught me that the only sons worth having are those of faith, mercy, and courage." Michael replied, echoing her words from months ago. "These children, all children, they're our sons and daughters now, every single one of them." 1 year after the Foundation's launch, the morning sun painted golden streaks across the gleaming facade of the newest Sons of Grace Center in downtown Birmingham. The 3-story building stood proudly, its walls adorned with vibrant murals of children reading, playing, and reaching for the stars. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air, mixing with the aroma of newly installed wooden shelves filled with colorful books. Amara Johnson stood at the entrance, her heart swelling with emotion. She wore a simple but elegant navy blue dress, her hair styled naturally. Next to her, Michael Dunham had traded his signature suits for khakis and a crisp white shirt rolled up at the sleeves. Their fingers were intertwined, a gesture that now felt as natural as breathing. "Ready?" Michael whispered, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "More than ready," Amara replied, her voice steady with conviction. As they pushed open the double doors together, camera flashes erupted from the gathered media. Local families, many of whom Amara had known since childhood, pressed forward with warm smiles and tears of joy. The building's interior took everyone's breath away. Soaring ceilings with natural skylights, comfortable reading nooks filled with plush cushions, and state-of-the-art computer labs designed for both learning and creativity. "Miss Amara, Miss Amara." A group of children broke free from their parents, running toward her with open arms. She knelt down to embrace them, her eyes glistening. "Papa Mike!" Others called out, surrounding Michael. He lifted the smallest child, 6-year-old Sarah, onto his shoulders with practiced ease. The nickname had stuck after that first summer, spreading from center to center as they opened across the country. Local news reporters jostled for position, their cameras capturing the moment. But this wasn't like the scandal photos from before. These images showed genuine joy, purpose, and community. "Mr. Dunham," one reporter called out, "how does it feel to see your vision become reality?" Michael shook his head, smiling. "This was never my vision alone. This," he gestured to the children exploring their new haven, "this is Amara's dream. She saw it first, in a church basement with nothing but faith and determination. I just helped build the walls around what was already there." Amara led tours through the facility, showing off the music room with its donated instruments, the kitchen where cooking classes would teach nutrition alongside math, and the garden where children would learn science by growing their own vegetables. Every detail reflected her understanding of what children truly needed, not just education, but nurturing, dignity, and hope. Mothers hugged her, sharing stories of how the other centers had already changed their children's lives. "My Marcus is reading at grade level now," one woman said proudly, "and he wants to be a teacher when he grows up." As the afternoon progressed, families gathered in the courtyard for a community celebration. Children performed songs they'd learned at other centers, their voices rising clear and strong in the autumn air. Tables overflowed with home-cooked dishes brought by local families, the aroma of southern comfort food filling the space with warmth. The sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Most of the reporters had left, leaving behind the people who mattered most, the families, the children, the community that had become their extended family. In the courtyard, surrounded by blooming roses and newly planted saplings, Michael turned to Amara. The setting sun caught the silver threads in his once perfectly groomed hair, evidence of a year spent working alongside communities, getting his hands dirty, learning to live with imperfection, and finding beauty in it. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered himself to one knee. The children, who had been in on the secret, gathered around in an excited circle. Jordan, now healthy and strong, stood at the front, grinning widely. "Amara," Michael's voice trembled slightly, "you gave me sons after all, sons of hope. You showed me that true wealth isn't in bank accounts or boardrooms. It's in the light in a child's eyes when they master a difficult math problem. It's in the way communities come together to lift each other up. It's in the kind of love that serves rather than takes." Tears rolled freely down Amara's cheeks as she looked at the man before her, so different from the cold CEO who had once scolded her for dropped champagne glasses. "And you," she replied, her voice soft but clear, "you gave me faith, not fame. Faith that dreams can become reality. Faith that love can bridge any divide. Faith that God's grace is bigger than our past. He slipped a simple ring onto her finger, not ostentatious, but elegant and meaningful. Their lips met in a gentle kiss as cheers erupted around them. The children threw flower petals, and someone started playing Amazing Grace on the new piano inside. The scene shifted to years later, though the courtyard remained the same. Michael and Amara sat on a bench, their hands still clasped together, watching a new generation of children play. The Sons of Grace centers had multiplied across the nation, each one a testament to what happens when love and resources flow together. A little girl with pigtails ran up to show them her perfect spelling test. A teenage boy proudly displayed his college acceptance letter. Each child was a testament to their shared vision, that every life deserved nurturing, every dream deserved a chance, and every heart deserved to know its worth. The Maid and the CEO, now equals before God and love, had built something far greater than either could have imagined alone. Their legacy wasn't in buildings or bank accounts, but in the laughter of children, the strength of communities, and the power of grace to transform lives. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.